Still unable to find the right words, I gently embraced my granddaughter, Wendy. "I'm sorry, your mom is." I told her in a trembling voice that your mom had gone a long way. It was a reality too harsh for a 10-year-old girl. No matter her reaction, I was prepared to support her. When Wendy learned what had happened to her mom, she suddenly smashed the photo frame in the living room. The acrylic frame contained a family picture of Wendy, my daughter, her husband, and me. There are 4 of us. It was only secured at the corners, so even a small effort from her was enough to shatter it. Silently, the photo alone fell to the floor. I couldn't understand her actions and raised my voice without thinking. "Stop it. That's a precious memory from our family trip, isn't it?"
"But, Grandma, Mom told me to look at the back of this."
Unperturbed, Wendy picked up the fallen photo. She was an innocent, smiling girl, but sometimes her words seemed surprisingly mature. Perhaps my daughter Emily's spirit appeared here and told Wendy to do this.
"No," she said, "if something happened to her, to look at the back of this photo."
Wendy handed me the photo with a bright smile. I looked at the picture, not knowing what it was about. "My name is Anne. Until recently, I was the president of a clothing brand. When I thought back to a few months ago during Saturday lunchtime at my usual diner, it was a chilly, rainy day in early spring. I'm thinking of retiring from the president. On my 67th birthday, Emily had strongly opposed it. I had always been there to advise her, and I was proud to be her understanding confidant. And I believed she was mine, so her reaction surprised me. Emily, a new era and trends are created by the new generation.
But, Mom, you still.
I want to leave my company in your hands. It will get even better that way, I assured her with a confident gaze. I knew she had the knack for spotting trends.
All right, Mom, it's your cherished company. I'll make sure it grows even bigger.
Her enthusiastic demeanor reminded me of my husband, who had passed away early. When the company was just starting, he was full of determination. "I will definitely make you happy." Then, right after Emily was born and I was savoring our happiness, he died in an accident. The loss came so suddenly I couldn't even feel sad, just blamed myself. But then, there was Emily. I had to protect and raise her, which spurred me on. Without Emily, I wouldn't have made it this far. Raising a daughter on my own while managing a business, I lived my life to the fullest. I was relieved I could get her through college. Her once dependable small back was now slightly taller and more reliable than mine. Now, Emily is dedicatedly pushing our company forward every day. She still consults me about anything uncertain or troubling her. Today, she called me for lunch to discuss her concerns about our relationship with a rival company.
Mom, sorry to keep you waiting. Have you ordered yet?
I'm just deciding now. As we both looked over the menu, we finished ordering through the touchscreen installed at the table. Then, Emily's expression sharpened as she switched to her business demeanor.
So, you see, Nancy is.
Nancy was Emily's classmate and the president of a rival company. They met in college and remained in touch even after graduating and getting married. I had met her several times, a person who appeared serene yet possessed a remarkable sense of creativity. Nancy has also started her own company, and she's a good rival, competing in performance with Emily. Lately, though, there's something off about Nancy.
She's suddenly become distant.
Don't you know why?
Not really. I've even been blocked on social media, wondering what to do.
While munching on her specialty fried chicken with plenty of tartar sauce.
What do you think?
She stuffed her mouth full as she spoke. We've had these kinds of conversations before. But neither Emily nor I expected that she would become bitter enemies with her childhood friend. It would be best if they could meet and talk, but that seems difficult.
And there's a bit about David too.
Emily added with a troubled look. David is her husband and also the vice president.
Lately, he's been making a lot of mistakes at work, and I have to cover for him.
Really?
Totally. He forgets his documents at meetings with clients, shows up late to meetings with bed hair.
The stories of David's blunders continued, and it was stressful for Emily.
I'm grateful to you, Mom. You raised me while running the company, and I really respect that.
But Emily continued, looking down.
That's why I want to run your company properly, but I hate that he's messing it up.
After finishing our meal, we stepped outside. Basking in the early summer sun, I smiled and said, "He's trying his best. Remember, failure is the stepping stone to success. It'll get better." Emily puffed her cheeks, seemingly unconvinced. About 2 weeks after our lunch, we had a family dinner. Our family has a tradition of dining together once a month on the third Saturday. I always looked forward to these dinners more than anything. Since my husband passed away, I had become distant from my relatives, and I didn't have many friends nearby. Having retired from the presidency, I hardly talked to people anymore, so these occasions were especially important. I left home eagerly, arriving at the venue 30 minutes early. The place was a slightly upscale Taiwanese restaurant, renowned as a hidden gem in reviews. Seeing my overly excited self, the staff couldn't help but chuckle. "Oh my God." I was guided to a table marked reserved, where I waited for Emily and her family. Glancing outside the window, I noticed someone briskly walking under the street trees. It was Nancy. I leaned forward impulsively, but could only follow Nancy with my eyes through the glass. Since hearing from Emily, I had been somewhat worried. Nothing could be inferred from Nancy's brisk walking, but I wondered what she thought about Emily. As fellow business owners, shouldn't they have things in common? I had few friends in similar positions, but I rarely had fallouts with them. Therefore, it was hard for me to empathize with Nancy's feelings or Emily's. While I was thinking, Emily's family arrived, looking surprised.
Mom, you're quite early.
I guess I got the time wrong. I laughed awkwardly and urged them to their seats. Emily, her husband David, and their daughter Wendy each took their seats. Wendy is turning 10 this year. Her innocent smile is striking, but sometimes she acts surprisingly mature. We opened the menu and each picked our favorite dishes and sides to order.
Grandma, I don't have a single cavity.
Wendy announced proudly, showing off her neatly aligned teeth with a smile. Really? That's because you've been brushing well, haven't you?
Yes. I brush my teeth morning and night.
Wendy boasted, puffing out her chest. It was endearing to watch her, and it warmed my heart.
Dad has cavities though, 6 of them.
She glanced at David and giggled.
Hey, don't tease adults too much.
David smiled along though. I had heard he'd been making some mistakes at work and wondered if he might be feeling down. But he seemed cheerful throughout. And there was no sign of trouble between him and Emily. They were chatting happily.
Dad, you should brush properly too.
I do. I even use an electric toothbrush.
Their light-hearted banter brought smiles to all three, making it a joyful family moment. Maybe Emily's concerns weren't as serious as I thought. Soon after, our food arrived. The table was set with dishes for 4, along with various other dishes. Eat up, everyone.
Mom, we can't possibly eat all this.
It's fine. Right, Wendy, you're not picky.
I don't like bell peppers. Does this have bell peppers in it?
Wendy peered suspiciously as David laughed.
If there are, I'll eat them.
But you don't like bell peppers either. I know.
Called out by his daughter, David and Emily both burst into laughter, revealing a side of him I hadn't seen.
No, that's not true.
David chuckled sheepishly and began eating his noodle. Amid the cheerful atmosphere, I glanced around the restaurant. Perhaps because it was lunchtime, the place was bustling with customers. Staff were busy setting tables and guiding diners. In the kitchen, pans were sizzling as dish after dish was prepared. A hefty chef who seemed to be in charge shouted, "Table 7, Xiao Long Bao." A waitress swiftly carried the dish out, eager to serve it hot. It's a nice place. The food is delicious. I sipped some dim sum soup and commented,
Yes, and the atmosphere is great. But still, I think my wife's cooking is the best.
Stop it. What are you saying?
Emily laughed, a bit embarrassed but clearly pleased. It was a heartwarming moment until Wendy spoke up.
Liar.
What? In an instant, the adults froze. The bustle of the restaurant seemed to fade away, and an eerie silence fell over us. The 3 adults stared at Wendy. Wendy, what did you just say? While forcing a smile, I asked Wendy,
I said Dad was a liar because Dad always leaves Mom's cooking.
No, that's not it. It's because I snack too much before dinner.
Wendy looked at me skeptically as I awkwardly tried to explain. But her expression quickly changed back to one of innocence, and she burst into laughter.
Really? Dad, that's not good.
That's right. Wendy's been patient.
From now on, no snacks for Dad.
Oh, come on. That's not fair.
Laughter filled the air, and the 3 of us were smiling again. Before we knew it, the sounds around us became audible again, and the lively atmosphere seemed to return. After dessert, which was almond jelly, we ended our meal without incident. As we were leaving, I lingered a bit to say goodbye to Emily's family.
Grandma, thanks for the dinner today. Bye-bye.
See you, Wendy. She waved her little hand vigorously and ran off in the opposite direction I was going. What was with Wendy I saw today? Both Emily and David just laughed it off, saying, "She's always like that," which also worried me.
Mom, see you next month.
We'll treat you next time.
With those words, the 2 disappeared into the crowd with Wendy. It was a fun and enjoyable meal as usual, and I felt the usual pang of sadness at parting. But something nagging at me felt like a splinter had formed. Although Emily and I said, "See you next month," it was unexpectedly betrayed. Just a few days after our meal, Emily was in a car accident. I rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She was only 38. I can't believe it. Why? Emily lay on the hospital bed, her eyes firmly closed. David had come out to the hallway soon after arriving, and I could hear his sobs, which were not my imagination. Both David and I were engulfed in grief and could not speak for a while. David, who regained his composure first, came up to me with a tear-streaked face.
I'm sorry, I have a meeting soon. Could you pick up Wendy for me?
Oh, you have a meeting.
And I think I'll be busy and away from home for a while, so I'd like you to take care of Wendy.
I simply replied, okay, and watched David leave. The suddenness of it all left me in a daze. Unlike David, I wasn't strong enough to act immediately after losing a loved one. The days I spent with my daughter flashed through my mind in an instant, almost missing Wendy in them. Wendy should be getting out of school about now, and she doesn't know about this yet. How should I tell her about her mom's death? I headed to Emily's house. Using the spare key from the mailbox to enter, I started preparing to take care of Wendy. Soon after, Wendy came home.
Grandma.
She must have sensed something from seeing me. Dropping her pastel-colored backpack in the living room, she came closer. The innocent smile that was so characteristic was gone, and she looked at me curiously. Still unable to find the right words, I gently embraced Wendy. Wendy, I'm sorry. Your mom well. I told her in a trembling voice that your mom had gone a long way. It was a reality too harsh for a 10-year-old girl. No matter her reaction, I was ready to support her. However, Wendy slipped out of my arms and picked up a photo frame displayed in the living room. The acrylic frame contained a family picture of Wendy, my daughter, her husband, and me. There are 4 of us. Wendy? Just as I thought she was staring intently, suddenly Wendy broke the frame. The frame, held together only at the corners, easily came apart with a little force from her young hands. Just like that, the photo fell to the floor. Unable to understand her actions, I inadvertently raised my voice. Stop it. That's a precious memory of our family trip, isn't it?
But, Grandma, Mom told me to look at the back of this.
Wendy, undisturbed, picked up the fallen photo. Could it be that Emily's spirit appeared here and told Wendy to do this?
No, she said if something happened to her, to look at the back of this photo.
Wendy handed me the photo with a bright smile. I looked at it, puzzled, and turned it over. On the back, in Emily's handwriting, it read, "I am being targeted by my husband." The hurried writing seemed to convey an urgent message. Targeted by her husband, David. What did that mean? I had never heard such a thing from Emily. Could it be that only Wendy and Emily knew about this? Could this message be related to Emily's death? Could David have? He hadn't shown any signs, and he had been at the hospital with me, mourning Emily's death. My thoughts were swirling, becoming more confused. Then David returned, muttering to himself.
Damn, I forgot my documents here.
Seizing the opportunity, I confronted David. David, we need to talk. Come here, please.
No, I have a meeting.
David seemed to be avoiding the conversation. As if he was hiding something or knew something he didn't want to be known. I quickly blocked his path with the message on the back of the photo. What is this? David glanced at it and muttered, "Damn," under his breath before looking away. I pressed him further. "Answer me. This is Emily's handwriting."
I don't know anything about it. My wife has just died, and you bring up this distasteful prank?
Emily told Wendy to look at this if something happened to her. Why don't you know?
Emily?
David was clearly agitated, his eyes darting around as he began to sweat. No matter what I asked, David kept denying any knowledge. Then Wendy quietly added,
It makes sense that Dad wouldn't know. Mom and Dad never talked about anything at home.
Wendy, stop it.
Mom said it was pointless to talk to Dad. He never listened to her anyway.
But when we met last time, you two seemed to be getting along well."
That was just trying not to worry you, Grandma.
That's why they pretended to get along.
Wendy, stop talking nonsense.
It's the truth. Dad's the liar.
Who are you calling a liar?
David, enraged, raised his fist. I thought he was going to hit Wendy, so I instinctively jumped on him. "Stop! Don't you dare touch Wendy!"
Let go.
He swung his raised fist down on my back. Ouch!
Grandma,
I fell to the floor with a dull thud. Wendy came over and looked into my face, her eyes brimming with tears. If things continued this way, both of us might end up being hit by David. He was mumbling something, his face red and his shoulders shaking.
It's all her fault. Everything.
I didn't know whom he was blaming. I managed to get up and urged Wendy to go outside.
no. I'm not leaving without you, Grandma.
Tears finally spilled from Wendy's eyes. She clung to me crying, while David continued to mutter to himself. Holding my aching back, I crawled toward the entrance. Noticing this, David shouted, "You're not getting away," as he picked up a pair of scissors and started to chase us. We were just a few steps from the door, but it wasn't enough. "Help!" I shouted as I shielded Wendy. That was when it happened. The door suddenly opened and someone burst in.
No.
With a mighty yell, Nancy appeared. Using her business bag as a shield, she charged at David and pushed him back. David stumbled and fell to the floor. Nancy then pinned his arm behind his back and held him down on the floor.
Give it up. I've called the police. What have you done to them?
Ouch. Who the hell are you?
Taken aback by the unexpected arrival, both Wendy and I were shocked. "Nancy, why are you here?"
Oh, Anne, long time no see. Emily asked me to look after you too.
Nancy explained that she had made a promise to Emily. It was when Nancy's company was struggling, and she had consulted Emily about management strategies. Following Emily's advice had gradually improved her business. In gratitude, Nancy had told Emily to call on her if she ever needed help.
Well then, if something happens to me, please take care of Wendy and my mom.
Although Nancy didn't fully understand at the time, she had always kept that promise in mind.
I knew Emily had a way of foreseeing things. So I believed that something might happen eventually, though I hoped it wouldn't.
Nancy chuckled wryly.
That's why I started investigating what was going on around Emily.
As the investigation by a private detective progressed, concerns about David began to arise. Initially, since he was Emily's husband, It wasn't unusual to think he might be involved in some related matters. But then, it became clear that there was something abnormally wrong. What do you mean?
You must be aware that he had Emily cover for his mistakes at work.
Of course, I knew that. But what does that have to do with this? David groaned in frustration and exclaimed, "It's all her fault."
Emily was always helping me, meddling unnecessarily. It was annoying.
Annoying? You felt that way?
My self-esteem was damaged. I am the vice president, after all.
Unbelievably, David harbored resentment towards Emily.
And from that resentment, he had been planning to take over the company.
Exposed, David started ranting nonsensically. Nancy firmly restrained him. David continued to rave.
Today's car accident was a coincidence. I thought it was lucky. I saw it as a chance to take over the company.
How can that be? You were crying in the hospital. I clearly heard David sobbing. Was that also his act?
Acting? No, those were tears of joy.
Far from mourning Emily's death, he was internally delighted at the opportunity to take over the company and cried tears for that reason. David's nature was utterly twisted. I was too shocked to speak, but Wendy clearly stated,
He's the worst. He's not my dad.
Just then, the sound of a police car arriving could be heard. Through the open front door, a robust police officer entered, followed by a slender middle-aged officer for support. David was subdued by the robust officer and dragged away. Beside that, we explained the situation to the middle-aged officer. By the way, Nancy, that was quite the charge.
Well, I did karate as a kid.
Shortly after, the police officer cautioned her, "Please avoid dangerous actions." Wendy and I ended up living together. Emily's funeral received condolence messages from business associates and her friends, and Nancy also attended the ceremony. I truly felt it was good that we could send off my daughter together. After the interrogation by the police, I saw David again a few days later, and he looked haggard. A large bruise had formed on my back where he had hit me. On Nancy's advice, I went to the hospital, got a medical report, and submitted it where necessary. Whether it was because of that or not, David was eventually convicted of assault. I imagine he's in prison now. I decided to legally adopt Wendy and raise her myself. With everything that happened, I felt drained of both physical and mental energy. But I can't afford to fall apart for Wendy's sake. I must protect this child left by Emily. I'll try to hang in there a little longer. I whispered to myself as I watched Wendy's sleeping face. After the funeral, Nancy invited me for tea, and we went to a chic cafe near the station. There, Nancy confessed that she hadn't genuinely disliked Emily.
Embarrassing to admit, but I was jealous of Emily.
Jealous? Why?
I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I could never beat Emily.
Nancy confessed after discussing business strategies, which confirmed her feelings.
I was jealous and frustrated, and I ended up blocking her on social media to distance myself.
She continued, taking a sip of her latte before adding,
But really, deep down I respected Emily.
Nancy said this with a hint of sadness. Perhaps somewhere in her heart, she regretted blocking Emily on social media.
If I had known it would come to this, I honestly wish I had reconciled with her.
For Nancy, Emily was a rival but also someone worthy of respect. "Nancy, thank you for being a friend to Emily," I said, to which Nancy smiled shyly. Then, the conversation shifted to what would happen with my company. With both the president and the vice president gone, rebuilding the company would be difficult. I was temporarily managing some parts, but I couldn't continue for long. I was considering transferring ownership and letting go of the company.
Please let me do it.
Nancy suddenly offered it, and I almost spit out my coffee in surprise. I hadn't expected Nancy to say that. But it's going to be tough.
I fully understand the difficulties, but I want to protect the company that Emily and you cherished. Please let me.
Nancy earnestly begged for it. I hesitated, but was moved by her enthusiasm and felt that I could entrust her with it. "All right, I'll proceed with that in the board meeting."
Thank you so much.
This marked the beginning of Nancy and I growing closer. In the months that followed, we often dined together, and I came to think of her like a daughter. Meanwhile, Wendy, though separated from her parents, didn't seem much bothered about her father. She had somewhat come to terms with her mother's death over these months. Honestly, I still couldn't believe Emily was gone, but I decided to live looking forward. Lately, Nancy also comes to visit, paying respects to Emily's portrait. Wendy and she have grown closer, and their outings together have increased. Today, we enjoyed a girls' day out at the diner where Emily and I used to have lunch.
Nancy, guess what? I don't have a single cavity.
Wendy proudly boasted. I couldn't help but hope for such peaceful days to continue.